The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. Thick clouds hung low over the forested valley, turning everything grey. Drenched leaves sagged. Mud squelched beneath the boots of Arlen Voss, a 40-year-old man who had grown tired of city life and moved to the edge of civilization 5 years ago. His wooden cabin sat quiet behind him, half hidden by trees. Arlen was gathering firewood when he heard the cry. It was faint, barely more than a whisper, but it made him freeze. Not an animal, not human either. A strange wobbling sound, like pain wrapped in desperation. He turned toward the deeper woods. There it was again. He hesitated. Most people wouldn't go into the forest at dusk, but Arlen wasn't most people. He dropped the woodpile and followed the sound. The trees thickened as he walked, the undergrowth clawing at his legs. The wind howled softly, and the cry grew louder. Then, suddenly, it stopped. He stepped into a small clearing. At the center was a figure slumped over, silver skin faintly glowing in the fading light. Beside her, a bundle wrapped in faded cloth trembled. An alien. Arlen had seen them before. The integration program had brought a few alien refugees to Earth in the last 2 years. Some came from war-torn planets, others escaped destroyed colonies. But they were kept in cities, under watch. This one, she was alone. Her long limbs shook as she tried to rise, shielding the bundle behind her. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw, "do not take my child." Arlen raised both hands. "I won't, I swear. Are you hurt?" The woman's eyes were large and luminous, shimmering with fear and fatigue. Her cheeks were hollow, her arms thin. "I am Yelri," she said. "My baby. She hasn't fed. My milk has dried up. For 3 days I have had no food. She grows weak." The bundle let out a soft, hungry whimper. Arlen's heart twisted. He stepped closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "You're safe now. I live nearby. Come with me. We'll help your baby." Yelri looked torn, lips trembling. "You would help an alien?" "Yes." She didn't move for a moment. Then her knees buckled. Arlen caught her just in time. He scooped her up gently, holding both her and the child against his chest. Her body was ice cold, yet the tiny warmth of the baby pressed against him made his arms tighten protectively. As he walked back through the trees, something changed in the air. The forest no longer felt heavy. It felt watchful, as if nature itself had taken notice. Inside the cabin, Arlen stoked the fire high. He laid Yelri on his cot and gently unwrapped the baby from the cloth. The child was tiny, with soft lavender skin and eyelids that fluttered weakly. She let out a thin cry, lips searching blindly. "She's starving," Yelri said, tears slipping from the corners of her eyes. "I've failed her. I am unfit." "Don't say that," Arlen said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You kept her alive. That's no small thing." He brought warm blankets, heated soup, and bottles of water. Yelri drank slowly, her hands shaking. As the firelight danced across the room, Yelri's eyes never left her child. "What's her name?" Arlen asked. "Lumi," she whispered. "It means light, in my language." "That's beautiful." Yelri's eyes shimmered again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something warmer, grateful, hopeful. "I have no one," she said. "I ran from the camps. They were going to take her from me. Say I could not raise her right." Arlen stared at the small, delicate child. The thought of anyone taking her made something burn in his chest. "No one's taking her now." Yelri blinked. "Why? Do you care?" He didn't answer right away. Maybe. It was the loneliness. Maybe it was something deeper, some quiet need he hadn't named. But in that moment, all he saw was a mother and child, fragile and cold, asking for kindness. "Because you're here," he finally said, "and you asked." And she nodded, as if that was all she needed. That night, the wind howled louder outside, but inside the cabin, warmth returned. A human man and an alien mother sat beside a fire, two strangers pulled together by a baby's cry, and somewhere in that silence, something new began. Yelri stirred from her sleep just as the morning sun touched the window pane. Her silver skin no longer looked dull, and there was a soft flush to her cheeks. Arlen was already awake, sitting in a chair beside the fire, holding Lumi in his arms. Baby had fallen asleep after sipping tiny drops of warmed herbal broth Arlen had carefully made. He had crushed oats, mixed them with boiled water, and added a touch of sweetness from a fruit syrup he made himself. It wasn't milk, but it was something. Enough to calm Lumi's endless whimpers. Yelri sat up slowly. "She's still alive?" "She is. She's strong, like her mother," Arlen said, glancing at Yelri with a small smile. A tear rolled down Yelri's cheek, though this time it wasn't from fear. "Thank you, Arlen." He looked surprised. "I didn't tell you my name." "You whispered it in your sleep." I listened. Arlen felt heat rise to his face. He cleared his throat and gently handed Lumi back to her mother. The baby let out a soft sigh, curling into Yelri's warmth like she belonged there forever. "She needs real nourishment soon," Yelri murmured, brushing her fingers along Lumi's soft cheek. "Something to help her grow. I fear I may not recover in time." Arlen stood and walked to a shelf near the window. "There's a town a few miles away. It's not much, but there's a market and a clinic. They might have infant formula. I can trade some of my supplies." Yelri's gaze dropped. "But if they see her or me—" "They won't," he said firmly. "I'll go alone. You stay here. No one knows about this place but me." She hesitated, her arms tightening around Lumi. "And you will come back?" He met her eyes. "I promise." The word was simple, yet it settled between them like an oath spoken from the soul. Yelri nodded, and Arlen packed a small bag with jars of honey, dried mushrooms, and hand-carved tools, things that could fetch value in a quiet town. As he stepped to the door, Yelri's voice stopped him. "Arlen?" He turned. "Why are you so kind to us?" she asked softly, her voice like a fragile breeze. He thought for a moment before answering. "Because you shouldn't have to beg for help. No mother should." Yelri looked down at Lumi, whispering something in her language, her lips forming a soft, melodic hum. When Arlen left, the cabin felt emptier than before. But Yelri held Lumi close, listening to the wind, hoping it carried him safely. The journey to the town was long and quiet. Arlen kept his head low, made simple trades, and spoke little. He managed to find a dusty tin of powdered milk tucked behind older cans in a forgotten corner of the store. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He returned after sunset. Yelri opened the door before he could knock. Her eyes were wide, full of light and worry and relief all at once. She reached out, fingers brushing his coat like she had to confirm he was real. "You came back," she whispered. "I said I would." He handed her the supplies, and Yelri looked through them like they were treasures from a different world. That night, as Lumi drank the warm milk from a small bottle, her eyes fluttered open and locked onto Arlen's face. She gurgled, then let out the faintest, sweetest coo he had ever heard. Yelri's hand slid over his, resting gently. She knows you've helped her." Arlen smiled, but inside, something deeper stirred, something soft and unfamiliar. He looked at Yelri, her gentle smile framed by the glow of the fire, and thought how strange it was to feel so connected to someone so different. And yet, not different at all. Their hands remained touching, neither of them pulling away. In that quiet space while the baby slept between them, two worlds began to melt into one. Not with noise, not with grand speeches, but with simple actions, shared silences, and the kind of closeness that didn't need words to be real. The days passed gently. Arlen's cabin, once filled only with the sound of wind and wood creaking, now echoed with soft hums from Yelri's lips and tiny sighs from Lumi. The baby's strength returned slowly. Her cheeks became fuller, her cries less desperate. She even started to smile, small, brief ones that lit up the entire room. Arlen found himself watching them often. Yelri would sit by the window with Lumi curled against her, whispering stories from her home planet, a world of glowing trees and floating rivers. She spoke of stars that pulsed with color and skies that sang during storms. He couldn't picture it all, but the way she told it made him want to. One evening, as the sun dipped below the treetops, Yelri sat near the fireplace, brushing out her hair with a carved wooden comb Arlen had made. Her silken strands shimmered like threads of moonlight. "You don't speak much of your past," she said softly, not looking at him. Arlen was at the table sharpening a blade. He paused, considering. "Not much to tell," he replied. "Used to work in the city, computers, long hours, empty apartment. No one to miss me when I left." Yelri turned to look at him, her eyes like melted silver. "But you had freedom." He gave a dry chuckle. "Freedom's not always happiness." She tilted her head, curious. "I walked away because I was tired of noise, of people pretending to care. Out here, at least the silence is honest." "But now you are not alone," she said, almost shyly. He met her gaze, and something passed between them, a warmth that didn't come from the fire. "No," he said quietly. "Now I'm not." That night, after Lumi had fallen asleep in her little nest of blankets, Yelri stepped outside. The stars were brilliant, sharp against the black sky. Arlen followed her out, holding 2 warm cups of berry tea he'd made from the forest. She took one with a smile. "You always bring me warmth," he sipped, leaning beside her on the wooden rail. "You brought light back into this place. It hadn't seen much of that in years." Yelri turned her face toward the stars. "Where I'm from, when someone saves your child, it is a bond for life. You are marked on our hearts." Arlen didn't know what to say. The way she spoke, soft, certain, made his chest ache a little. She continued, voice lower now. "I dreamed once, before the war, of living on a world like this, trees, rivers, quiet, a place to raise a family. I never thought it could happen." "It's not perfect," Arlen murmured. Yelri looked at him, her expression open. "It doesn't need to be. It only needs to be safe and full of kindness." He glanced down at her hand resting on the rail, so close to his. Without thinking, he placed his fingers lightly over hers. She didn't move away. "I think," she whispered, "Lumi likes you more than me." "She just knows you need rest," he said, smiling. They stood together like that for a long time, the silence stretching between them like a soft blanket. Above them, the stars kept watch. Below, Lumi stirred once in her sleep, then settled. Again. Yelri sighed contentedly. "I never believed I would find peace again. Not after everything I lost." "You haven't lost everything," Arlen said gently. "You still have her. And now, maybe more." She turned her head slightly, eyes shining. "Maybe more." The next day, Yelri began to hum again, songs with no words, just sound and feeling. When Arlen asked what they meant, she said they were lullabies from her mother's voice, passed through generations. "Do you miss her?" he asked. "Every day," she replied. "But now I sing them to Lumi, so she remembers a part of who we are." In the quiet moments, Arlen found himself drawn to Yelri not just because of her alien nature, but because of her gentleness, her courage. She had lost her world, yet held on to hope with both hands. She laughed more often now, smiled, without fear, and every time her eyes met his, something inside him stirred, something warm, unfamiliar, but welcome. The bond was growing, not through grand gestures, but in the simple things. A shared meal, a quiet evening, the way their hands touched just a moment longer than before. 2. Lives once broken were beginning to weave together, not by accident, but by choice. The first snowfall came quietly. Yelri stood at the window with Lumi tucked into her arms, watching white flakes fall from the sky like tiny feathers. She pressed her hand to the cold glass and whispered, "It's beautiful, like the clouds are shedding their dreams." Arlen was stacking firewood near the hearth, watching her from the corner of his eye. "That's the first time you've smiled at snow." "It never snowed where I came from. Only ash, after the fighting." He set down the last log and crossed the room. "Well, here, snow means quiet. It wraps the world up like a blanket, hides the sharp edges." Yelri looked over at him. "You speak poetry sometimes." "You just don't know it," he chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I just speak what I see." Outside, the world was turning white, but inside the cabin, it was warm and full of quiet laughter. Lumi had started giggling, small, chirping, sounds that echoed through the walls like music. She was stronger now. Her eyes were bright, her grip firm. One evening, Yelri brought out a piece of shimmering cloth from her small satchel, the only thing she had taken from her ship before. It burned. She laid it on the table and began stitching it with Arlen's old sewing needles and some thread he'd found in a drawer. "What are you making?" he asked. "A sling," she replied, "to carry Lumi close to me when I walk. She sleeps better when she feels my heartbeat." Arlen watched her fingers move, delicate and precise. Her hair fell across her face and he reached over to tuck it gently behind her ear. She stilled. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Then her hand reached up and settled on his cheek, soft and cool. "You feel warm," she whispered. "So do you," he said, voice barely above a breath. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but the space between them shrank, and something deeper passed through it. The kind of closeness that came not from bodies, but from hearts drawn together by pain, healing, and quiet understanding. That night, as they sat by the fire, Yelri began to speak of things she hadn't dared to before, of the escape, of hiding. For days in her wrecked ship, with nothing but melted snow to drink and Lumi pressed to her chest, crying from hunger. "I thought I would die holding her," she said, staring into the flames. "And I accepted that, as long as she didn't suffer more." Arlen took her hand. "She didn't. You found me. Or I found you. Doesn't matter. You both made it." She turned her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't want to leave now. Not ever." He squeezed her hand. "Then don't." Yelri blinked, uncertain. "You would let us stay? Even after she grows? Even after all this?" He nodded slowly. "This is your home now, if you want it to be. You and Lumi." Her lips trembled and a tear rolled down her cheek. "I do. I want to stay. With you." There was no need for fancy words, no declarations. Just the warmth of her fingers in his, the way her shoulders relaxed when he said it, and the soft sound of Lumi's tiny breaths as she slept beside them. The next morning, Arlen added another. Caught to the room, but Yelri shook her head. "We don't need it," she said with a quiet smile, reaching for his hand. "We're already close enough." As winter deepened, their bond grew. They began to share not only warmth, but dreams. Arlen taught Yelri how to cook human dishes. She showed him how to listen for vibrations in the trees, an instinct from her world that warned of distant life. They became partners, not just for survival, but for something bigger, something softer. And at night, when Lumi was fast asleep and the snow tapped gently against the roof, Yelri would lean into Arlen's chest and whisper things in her native tongue. He didn't always understand the words, but he understood the feeling. It was love. And in his quiet, steady way, he returned it with every gesture, every soft word, and every moment he stayed beside her. He had once lived in silence, but now that silence had turned into peace, because Yelri and Lumi had filled the emptiness not with noise, but with life. Spring came with a whisper. The snow melted slowly, giving way to soft grass and blooming wildflowers that painted the hills in color. Birds returned to the skies, and the forest came alive with sound again, gentle, hopeful, alive. In Arlen's cabin, change had settled in deeply, but not just in the air or the seasons. Inside, love had taken root. Yelri now moved through the home like it was hers. She swept the floors with humming lips, rearranged things so Lumi could have safer play spaces, and filled the windowsills with wild herbs and tiny hand-woven charms from her people. Everything she touched felt lighter, brighter. Lumi had started walking. Wobbly steps at first, clinging to Arlen's fingers, her small feet padding across the wooden floor like soft rain. Yelri cried the first time it happened, holding her hand to her mouth, trembling with joy. Arlen lifted Lumi into the air and spun her gently, making her giggle like the whole world was a game. "She's so strong now," Yelri whispered one evening as they stood watching Lumi sleep, curled up with a blanket that smelled of pine and warmth. "You gave her a chance to live." Arlen shook his head. "You gave her the strength. I just made room." Yelri turned to him, eyes shining. "You did more than that. You gave us a place to heal, to belong." She stepped closer, heart pounding. "Arlen, I have no more people, no more stars to return to, but I don't feel lost anymore. Because when I look at you, I feel found." He took her hands gently. "You were never lost. You were just waiting for the right place to land." Her fingers tightened in his. "Then let me stay, not just as a guest, not just until Lumi grows." He smiled, lifting one of her hands to his lips. "Then stay, as my partner, as my family." Yelri's breath caught, her cheeks flushed with color, and her eyes filled with soft tears. She leaned in, and this time there were no more hesitations. Their lips met. It was a kiss full of warmth, not fire, full of promise, not desperation. It was simple and real, like everything between them had always been. And when they pulled apart, the world felt quieter, but fuller too. That night, as the fire crackled low and the stars returned to their places above, Yelri lay curled against Arlen's side, her head resting on his chest, her arm draped over his waist. Lumi slept nearby, her tiny breaths rising and falling like the rhythm of a new beginning. Yelri whispered, "My milk may have dried up, but love still flows through me." Arlen brushed his fingers through her hair. "That's all she'll ever need now." In the months that followed, they worked the land together, planting vegetables in the soft earth, building a small fence, even carving toys for Lumi. Strangers never came that deep into the forest. It was just the three of them, a man who once lived in silence, a woman from among the stars, and a child born of two worlds, raised not in fear or hunger, but in safety, surrounded by love. Sometimes, Yelri would look at the sky and smile, no longer, with sorrow, but with peace. She had found her new home, not in shining cities or starships, but in the hands of a quiet human who had chosen kindness over fear. And Arlen, once empty, now had a purpose. A reason to laugh, to speak, to dream again. They had saved each other, not with great power, not with weapons, but with simple acts of care. With love. And that love, shared between human and alien, echoed stronger than any battle cry. It was quiet, but it changed everything.